Hi everyone, I'm Max. Welcome to Spec Guide, the channel where we walk you through buying, choosing the right one, and then owning and maintaining an electric car. One of the most important things for owning an EV is how you charge it. And if it's possible, my favorite way is to charge at home because it's super convenient. And even though I rent my house, I have a charger in my home that I use to charge my Polestar 2 outside. You can see there. Excuse the backlighting in my garage. It's a bit of a finicky lighting situation. Anyhow, this is the charger unit I use, and this video is not sponsored by any one company. This was sent to us, sent to me for free, which was great. I appreciate it, but I had it installed by a proper electrician, done the right way, and I have it charging my car. This is super convenient. I can start every day if I want to with a full charge. It's super easy. I just snake it under my garage door. If you're so fortunate enough as to have a large enough garage that you're not throwing bikes and things in, you can even, of course, just park your car in your garage and charge it. It's great. And you can start the day with as much charge as you want. But the consequences for getting this wrong are huge. If you pick the wrong charger, you pick bad equipment, or you get it installed poorly, well, things can go wrong, very wrong. You can set fire to your house. All kinds of terrible things can happen. However, I have a friend who's an expert in this area. He's a good friend of Out of Spec. He's a really, really vigorous tester and a YouTuber of his own. He's Tom Malogany with State of Charge. And it's my honor to speak with him today about how he tests the chargers, his advice for beginners getting into this. You're getting your first electric car. This is going to be a great primer. So please watch this one all the way through. And if you're really interested and you want to research the market, get to know chargers better, you got to watch Tom's channel. He makes other content on EVs too, but his content with charging and testing chargers is second to none on YouTube. So please give it a watch if you haven't heard of him. And otherwise, look forward to our conversation. There's a lot of cool things we unpack here about how to get started in this world, picking the right EV charger, what these even are. Technically, they're not even called chargers, they're called EVSEs. We explain that and all more info in the video to come. So please watch. And yeah, this is Out of Spec Guide. I'll see you after the break. Tom, welcome to the channel. If people aren't familiar with who you are, they should be if they're looking at the EV world. You've been, if they watch the other Out of Spec channels, they've probably seen you there. But you have your own channel, State of Charge on YouTube. And Tom, you cover the charging world, which is, if you're new to this, way bigger than you could have ever imagined, because we're not just talking about, okay, one or two companies make chargers. There's like hundreds of these things on the market. And in my opinion, one of the most important things about owning an EV is how do you charge it at home if it's possible. And that's kind of what you cover.
Yep, absolutely. You've been doing it a while. I've been driving EVs since 2009. And the funny thing is, I started doing these reviews shortly after that. And it really wasn't a review at first. When EVs first hit the market like 15 years ago or so, there was a lot of compatibility issues. It would be like if I got the Ford Focus Electric, you couldn't use a Bosch charger because it didn't communicate properly, but you had to get the juice box, or if you bought a Nissan Leaf, don't use the Leviton charger, use this one. So I had a bunch of chargers here and I used to test all the EVs with them, and that's kind of how it started. And it's grown now to me doing these kind of very in-depth reviews of home charging equipment.
Yeah, they're absolutely in depth. You kind of go, you push things to the extreme. I know you durability test the chargers, you kind of test them, because if a lot of them will make claims like, oh, you could use this one outside of your garage. Well, then you're going to go and test and see, is it weatherproof? Is it actually going to hold up to that abuse? And then behind you on the wall, people can see you've got the receipts.
Yeah, I mean, this is a small sample of what I actually have here in the garage. That is less than a third of the number of chargers that I actually have here. I have a lot of them in boxes, waiting review, some of them that they're just older units that I took down. But I've physically used and tested over 100 by now chargers.
Wow. And people can, they can see the goods for themselves on your channel. But yeah, you test a lot of them. And I think you also have some custom electrical wiring set up at your house to accommodate all that.
Yeah, I have a 400 amp service I brought into my house so I could charge a lot of EVs at once. Most people wouldn't have to have a service that much. 200 amps for most people is going to handle their home as well as EV charging. But some people might need a little more. But I went a little overboard because I have four main circuits here, including a 100 amp circuit for an 80 amp charger that I have, and it's what I do for a living. So I had a pretty serious upgrade done a year ago.
Yeah, well, if anyone needs it, you do. But for people who don't know amps, volts, all of that, the best place, I think, it's one of your partners, but a great place to get started is Qmerit. So they've got no affiliation with us at Spec Guide, but I've heard of them. I know people who've used them, been really happy. It's basically a network of contractors and people who can help you get your local electrical set up for this.
Yeah, I for a while I've been running the YouTube channel for a little more than 3 years now. But I didn't take any sponsors for the first 2 years, even though I had offers. I had offers from a lot of the companies that make the chargers, but I can't take money from these companies because I review their products, and I have a problem with that. And so I ran the channel without making any money, just the YouTube ad revenue, which really isn't that much. And I finally said, I went out and said, oh, who would be a good partner? And Qmerit worked for me because they don't sell chargers, they install them, and I review them and recommend which charger to buy. And then it was great to have a complimentary service like this. And what I liked about the Qmerit was they, as you mentioned, they're a network of licensed electrical contractors that specialize in EV charging installation, and they train their staff for EV charging installation. Electric vehicle home charging equipment is different than anything else you have in your house. When you're charging your EV, you're pulling more power than the rest of your house. You might be pulling more power than the rest of your house and your neighbor's house at the same time. And that puts a strain on the equipment, on the connections, on the wires. And you can't treat electric vehicle charging equipment just like it's another appliance, like a ceiling fan. And so Qmerit set up a guide for their installers to follow, best practices. And it improves the safety. You may pay a little bit more to use the Q network than a local electrician. I'll be right out front with that. You may pay a couple $100 more, but you just bought this beautiful new EV, and now you're having your charger installed. That's not where you save the $200 or $300 when you're talking about pulling that amount of power, many hours continuously, many nights a week. In my opinion, it's worth having the right person do it, even if it costs a few bucks more.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I didn't work with one of their networks, but I found someone who specializes with EVs in my area. And I can tell you, maybe part of this was also living in Boulder, but it wasn't cheap. But it does feel better knowing it was done properly. And the way I set up my home, or I'm renting, but the way I set up basically the way I charge is I got a NEMA 1450 plug installed specifically with a purpose, letting, of course, the contractor know I'm going to be plugging in a vehicle to this. Because this 50 amp outlet, people may have seen these, dryers use these, some appliances use these. In the US, this is how we get a 240 volt hookup. These are common, but when like you said, Tom, when you're charging an EV, that's a continuous load for a long time.
It is, and not all outlets are created equal. You can, if you do say an Amazon search on NEMA 1450 outlets, Max, you'll see that you can buy some for under $10. Leviton, for instance, makes a NEMA 1450 outlet. It's like $9, I think. Okay. And then they'll see that $9 there. That's a Leviton, I'm sure. I can't even see it, but yep. I'm sure it's a Leviton. Yeah. But now, if you scroll down, you'll see there's ones that cost $80 or $90.
Here's
$60.
$60.
There's a Bryant. Yeah. Keep going. You'll find a Hubble, I think, is like $90. And so how could one company sell one for $9 and another one sell one for $90? And you look at them, they're the same outlets. Well, there's got to be something going on there. And the thing about it is, if you use a Leviton outlet, and I've done this for many years now, 15 years, I've talked to, look at that, $86 for a Hubble. You see that on the left? Compare that to the $9 Leviton, okay? So do you think you're getting the same product? And the $9 Leviton might work fine if you're using it for a dryer, like you said, where it's pulling a little power for 45 minutes, twice a week. But with EV charging, you're maxing out that power, that outlet, what it's allowed to deliver, sometimes for 7 or 8 or 9, 10 hours in a row, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a week. So it's being asked to do a duty cycle that it honestly isn't engineered to handle. And that's why you need to buy an outlet like this. Hubble makes great outlets. Look at them, $85 just for the outlet. But that's
Yep.
what you need to use, because so many of my followers have sent me pictures, Max, of their Leviton outlets melted. Matter of fact, I'm going to be making a video on this next week. One of my followers almost had his condo burned down because he used the cheap, or he didn't. His electrician installed a cheap Leviton outlet, and it melted, and while he was sleeping. So this is serious stuff. I urge your followers to make sure you hire a qualified electrician, even if it's not Qmerit, just somebody who's a specialist in EV charging, and follow up and say, if you're going to use an outlet, I recommend hardwiring, but if you're going to use an outlet, please don't use Leviton outlets. They're going to melt. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, no, that's a great PSA. You definitely want the quality hardware when you're running these continuous loads. You're gonna generate heat, and those are the kinds of things someone like Qmerit would walk you through. I
Right.
will say, the people I used were Tesla certified, so they were used to installing Tesla's on-wall connector. My car, Tom, is a Polestar 2, so that has an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. I could basically get 48 amps into that. But because it's a continuous load, their recommendation was I have at least a 60 amp breaker to do those 48 amps. And Tom, like you said, if I'd hardwired, I could do that. But because I got one of these NEMA 1450 sockets, the 50 in that stands for 50 amps, right? So you're not supposed to draw more than 50 amps continuously. Thereby, I can't not only go to 48, I have to go down to 40, which for me is fine. That's still like 9 kilowatts of charging speed, but it's basically one of those safety things that I wouldn't have known, to be honest, on my own, and I made this mistake myself. But dealing with all the people in our community and with a qualified electrician, these are the kinds of things you learn.
Yeah. Well, first thing, you made a good choice. I love the Polestar 2. Great car.
Yeah.
And what you talked about just now is called the 80% rule. When you're dealing with a continuous load like EV charging, where it's going to be more than 3 hours, you're only allowed to draw 80% of what the circuit's maximum current is. So if it's an NEMA 1450, as you said before, that means it can deliver 50 amps. If it's a continuous load, it can only deliver 80% of that. So that's 40 amps. So a NEMA 1450 can only deliver 40 amps, which would be 9.6 kilowatts to your Polestar 2, as opposed to the 11.5 that it can accept. But quite honestly, that little bit, 2 extra kilowatts, it's not going to make that big of a difference. If you have a big battery like I have on my Lightning, then it makes a little bit more of a difference, because the consumption rate is higher on the Lightning. I'm using more electricity. I got a bigger battery. I need to charge it a little bit quicker. But say on a Polestar 2, 9.6 kilowatts, fine. So I'm sure you're doing fine with that.
Absolutely, and it works well for me. And the reason also I did the plug and the 1450 option is because I am renting, so I'd like to be able to take what's called an EVSE. Technically, people call these chargers, but the charging part's on the car when you're charging at home. The electric vehicle supply equipment, I think I got that right. I like the flexibility of being able to remove that from the wall. But if someone owns their home and wants the fastest speed, like you mentioned, Tom, you got a Lightning or maybe a Hummer EV, and eventually you'd want to use the 80 amp charging or get into the higher speeds, yeah, you probably should hardwire your home.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you pointed out the EVSE, electric vehicle supply equipment. These aren't chargers, the onboard chargers built into the car, but quite honestly, it's something that, and I was a little bit of a stickler on this like 7 or 8 years ago. I was preaching, don't call them chargers, don't. Now I call them chargers, because that's what people understand, and I don't think anybody is going. A new EV owner is going to say, "Oh, I just bought this beautiful new, Volvo EX30. Now I need to go out and get an EVSE." They're going to say I need to get a charger. So I like to talk, even though it's not technically correct, I do call them chargers. And I urge other people to get over the EVSE thing. As long as you know that's what it really is technically called, I think it's fine to call them chargers, because that's what people understand.
Absolutely, I agree with you there. I mean, if we're talking in technical terms and we want to be precise, yes, that's what we call it. If someone calls it a charger and you're watching this video and you're more technically inclined, I don't know. I don't feel the need to correct people on that. It's just something, because it's my job here, I like to get that right. But most people, you're right, Tom, are not going to bother with that distinction, and you can figure out what they mean. The big question that, I would have if I imagine, someone's new into an EV, they buy a Lightning, a Mustang Mach-E, or they get a Model 3 or a Model Y, is a lot of these OEs, the original, the OEMs, the actual companies you buy the car from, Tesla, Ford, whomever, they will sell their own original charging wall connectors. Why would someone want to buy one of those, or why would someone not want to buy one of those?
Well, that's a good question. And so you would want to buy one of them if it's a good one. You wouldn't want to
Yeah.
buy one if the company isn't putting out a good one. Typically, I don't usually recommend them because in most cases they're overpriced and they're not better than, say, what a third party supplier would offer. I'll
Hmm.
make that exception with Tesla. Tesla's wall connector is outstanding,
Hmm.
and it's priced really well right now. It's at 475. For a little while, I think it was 425. I think they just raised it $50, and at 425, it was a stupid good deal. So it's still a great deal at 475. So I definitely recommend it. I did my best high powered chargers of 2023 video recently, and the wall connector was tied for first. So it's a great unit, and I would definitely recommend you getting it. As far as what some of the other OEMs are putting out, I haven't really found another uh, charger that the other OEMs put out that I would say this is definitely what you want to get.
Yeah.
Lucid's is pretty good. They gave me one. I haven't fully tested it out yet. I have it here in the garage, but I have to review that one soon.
Right.
And some of the other equipment's not bad, but I think in most cases there's better options when you go with a third party.
Yeah, definitely more flexibility too, because anytime you're buying the official one, I mean, this is what you get. And the big question I would also have is, let some people have a home where they are going to have multiple EVs, maybe if not immediately, eventually. One of them might be a Tesla, one of them might be a Volkswagen ID4. They get a Tesla connector. I understand it's possible you can just adapt that to basically the receptacle that's used on every non-Tesla EV currently, the J1772 port. I think Kyle does that at his house actually. But I don't know, Tom. Do you have any feelings about people using adapters if they want to get by with like one charger in the garage, but they've got two EVs in their home?
Right. So coincidentally, and we didn't set this up because we didn't talk about what we were going to talk about. This is
Hmm.
basically one of the types of adapters that you would use if you had a Tesla charger at your house, a wall connector. You'd put the wall connector end here, and then this is what you would plug into your J1772 vehicle.
Yeah.
And on the other way, and we really didn't set this up. I didn't know you were going to be asking me this. This is the adapter that you use to use a J1772 to charge a Tesla vehicle. So,
Hmm.
I had that set up and I didn't even know I was going to need it to be. Well, that's why I'm always using this stuff, and I have the CCS Connect adapter here. But I don't. Getting back to that question, I'm not a huge fan of introducing an adapter for daily use. To be honest
Hmm.
with you, it's another failure point, and a lot of current is going through these units, as we mentioned earlier, for many hours. I have to believe if you were to use an adapter as your daily charger, in many instances it's going to fail within 4 or 5, 3 or 4 years probably. So if it's possible, the best practice is to use the native plug that's on the charging equipment that you have. But if you have one charger and two EVs with different connectors, yeah, I suppose you can definitely do it. I'm not a big fan of that long term.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think it makes sense to know which direction you're going to go with the vehicle and then get your home charger to match that ideally. And then we can see if we look on Amazon, not just, among adapters, but the chargers. This is where, your channel comes in. There's so many of these, whether they have the Tesla port on them or they have J1772. There are so many units out there. The prices vary a lot. And the short answer here is obviously people can watch your channel. But Tom, offhand, like what are some of your favorites that you go to that you recommend to people most often?
So it depends. A lot of people ask me that, and I mean, I have a number of favorites. I certainly don't have one favorite. The Emporia, which happens to be up on the screen right now, the second one, that's an outstanding unit, and it's only $399. It's another reason why that was the one that was tied with the Tesla wall connector for my top 48 amp charger choices for 2023. United Chargers make some good units with the Grizzle E line, the Grizzle E Smart, the Grizzle E Classic. That's all happens to be there on the end. Yeah, $349. I weigh price heavily when I do my reviews because I believe people shouldn't have to pay $800 for home charging equipment. So when it's a good solid unit that performs well and has good features and the price is right, that's what really gives it my high scores. And both Emporia and United Chargers have very good units at very compelling prices, and they're good quality. They're safety certified. These units will last a long time. The ChargePoint Home Flex, which is next to the Emporia there, I like a lot also. But look at the price difference. It's very similar as far as what each unit has to offer. They're both Wi-Fi connected smart chargers that come with apps where you can manage your charging. You can look at past charging history, and they're both deliver the same amount of power. And look at the price difference. It's tough to recommend one that costs $300 more than the other. So that's why I've been heavy on Emporia recently, because I think they put out a really good product at a good price. Now you take a look at some of those other chargers right next to it, EV101 and Skywood 2. I haven't even looked at them, and I can tell you they're junk. Don't touch them with a 10-foot pole. They're not going to be safety certified. There's no way they're safety certified for $149. They wouldn't be able to afford that. And they probably have such substandard equipment on the inside that it's going to melt after less than a year. I don't know those two products there, but I bet you they have very short warranties, because I'm sure the manufacturer doesn't have confidence that they're going to last a long time. There's so much stuff coming up now, particularly from Asia, so many chargers, as you mentioned. And people, I know the Amazon culture is go to Amazon, search for something, and then filter it by price. Please don't buy your charging equipment that way. Make sure it's safety certified. And you can't even trust these Amazon ads that say UL, because some of them, like the connector might be a UL rated connector that they used for the product. So they put UL on their ad, even though the unit is not UL certified. They trick you. So please don't buy cheap equipment. The least problem you'll have is that it just melts and dies on you, but you're gonna have a much bigger problem. And we want you to be safe out there. And sometimes the most expensive thing that you buy is the cheapest, because you're gonna end up buying two of them.
But yeah, at best case, or some, like you said, Tom, some of your fan submitting pictures, people can risk setting fire to their homes if this equipment isn't up to par. So I absolutely agree with you there. And then the Amazon culture, it works for some things. Like I'll say I have some cheap items I bought off Amazon because they were a low price and they seem to have decent reviews. But when it comes to equipment like this, that's such a heavy duty appliance spec, charging a car continuously for 6 to 7 hours, absolutely agree with you. I think that's why independent media like yourself is important, because you can't go off these reviews and claims of certification, because what I've seen on Amazon and a lot of other online marketplaces is that's just not always trustworthy.
100% right. Those star ratings you see on Amazon, a lot of these companies have groups of people that get paid to just post positive reviews. You really can't follow that at all. So that's why I try to do these real deep dive reviews, and to let people know what equipment's good out there and what you can trust.
Yeah, and I'd like to end on a note of, people are worried like, oh, this sounds expensive. And yes, it is expensive. And these are areas where you want to spend money. There are a lot of interesting rebate programs. I guess Qmerit can help connect you to these. But depending on where you live and what your utility company is, there are actually lots of programs. I'll give an example. Where I live here in Boulder, we have Xcel Energy. And if you have a smart charger, so like that expensive ChargePoint Flex that you mentioned, yes, it's expensive, but because it has the smart functionality and they made a deal with ChargePoint about what times you're charging, whether they're on peak on the grid or off peak, they basically give you an incentive. I forget what it was at the top of my head, but it was at least several $100s. And if you were income qualified, I think like $1,300 off the price of both the unit and getting it installed. So there's a lot of rebates out there floating around.
100%. There's federal rebates, there's state rebates, and as you just mentioned, that's a utility rebate. So you've got local, federal, utility. There's so many different rebates and incentives out there for home charging equipment, both the unit itself and for the installation of the unit. That in many instances, you can get the vast majority of the cost of the unit and the installation covered with these incentives.
Covered, or they'll give you some basically low to no interest financing thing, because if you think about it logically, it makes sense. These utility companies see that you're adding a high demand load to your plan, and they're like, sure, we'll help you with that. EVs are, we can debate how they're going to affect the grid at a large scale, but you can understand why utility companies are here to offer rebates, and why also there's these other programs, because home charging is such a big deal for EV ownership. I mean, if I couldn't do it for my Polestar, it'd be really inconvenient, and I do like that there's this economy being set up around it and a clear demand. I mean, you're paying them for electricity and you end up saving money compared to what you would have been spent in a gas car, even in a Prius, and they're making money. And so yeah, for that reason, they're more than happy, whether it's federal, state, or utility based. There just seem to be plenty of these rebates floating around. I highly encourage people to research them, see if they qualify, make sure the equipment they're getting qualifies.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, with Qmerit being able to help customers, as part of the Qmerit service, if you use Qmerit to install your charger, you don't even have to ask about these rebates. They will tell you every rebate that you are possibly qualifying for with this home charging installation. So not to sound like a Qmerit commercial, this isn't a Qmerit commercial, but they do that for you. It's part of their service. So if you use Qmerit to install your charging equipment, they'll give you the list of the rebates that you qualify for.
Yeah, that's a brilliant business model. Makes sense for the customers, makes sense for them. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Tom. I can see why you work with them. It's a perfect match made in heaven there. But thank you so much for joining me today. I think this has been a great run through, just an introduction into the world of home charging.
Thanks for having me on, Max.
Absolutely. People can look at any of the products you mentioned and plenty of other things you test on your channel, State of Charge, all kinds of things that are interesting there. I love the content you make. So thanks for coming on, Tom.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.